You looked at my family and saw only what your prejudice allowed you to see. Yet, everything around you, every wall, every chair, every paycheck you've earned here, exists because of me. Tell me, miss, who truly doesn't belong? What happens when a waitress insults a wealthy family, only to discover they own the hotel she works at? Can she survive the consequences of her prejudice? But we start the video, let us know where you're watching this video, and if you like this story, don't forget to follow Story Store and Paul share your thoughts about this story in comments section. The Whitmore Grand Hotel stood majestic, a beacon of luxury in the city's skyline. Inside, crystal chandeliers sparkled above marble floors, and velvet seating whispered opulence. The hotel catered to the world's elite, politicians, celebrities, and billionaires. Samantha straightened her crisp white blouse, adjusting the gold name tag pinned above her heart. She had worked at the Whitmore Grand for 3 years, climbing her way up from room service to her current position as a senior waitress in the lobby's exclusive lounge. She prided herself on her efficiency, her no-nonsense approach, and her keen eye for spotting those who didn't belong. In a hotel that catered to the world's most powerful, she saw herself as a gatekeeper, protecting the sanctity of luxury. Her eyes flicked to the entrance as the glass doors swished open. A family walked in, 2 adults and 2 children. They were well-dressed, the man in a tailored navy suit that hugged his broad shoulders, the woman in a white, elegant pantsuit that exuded class. Their children, a boy and a girl, wore matching designer outfits, their shoes gleaming with newness. They moved with a quiet grace, their posture upright, their heads held high. Yet, Samantha's lips twisted into a frown. Something about them felt off. Her gaze swept over their skin, deep, rich shades of brown that contrasted starkly against the cream-colored walls. Her eyes narrowed as they walked deeper into the lobby, admiring the grand architecture with calm composure. She watched as the man's hand rested protectively on his daughter's shoulder, his other arm loosely encircling his wife's waist. They spoke in soft, affectionate tones, their voices blending harmoniously. But Samantha's mind had already made its judgment. She strode over, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, drawing curious glances from nearby guests. Her face hardened as she approached, her eyes cold and unwelcoming. She stopped before them, her stance wide, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Excuse me," she began, her voice laced with an icy edge. "May I help you?" The man turned, his expression warm and polite. "Yes, we're here to check in. We have a reservation." Samantha's eyes flicked over them again, skepticism clear in her gaze. "A reservation? Here?" Her voice rose, drawing attention from those seated nearby. She didn't bother to lower it. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" The woman's eyebrows arched, her face calm yet questioning. "Yes, this is the Whitmore Grand, correct?" Samantha's lips curled into a mocking smile. "Yes, it is, which is why I'm wondering how you could possibly afford to stay here." She let her words linger, her tone dripping with condescension. "This isn't some budget motel." The children's eyes widened, the boy instinctively stepping closer to his father. The girl's fingers tightened around her mother's hand, her face falling with confusion and hurt. The woman's jaw clenched, but her voice remained steady. "I don't believe our finances are any of your concern." "Oh, but they are," Samantha countered, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "You see, we don't allow loitering, and people who can't afford to stay here usually come to gawk or beg. I suggest you leave before I call security." The man's eyes darkened, his shoulders tensing. Yet his voice stayed measured, his words dignified. "We are paying guests. We have a reservation." He pulled out his phone, his fingers scrolling gracefully. "I can show you the confirmation." Samantha didn't even glance at the screen. She crossed her arms tighter, her head shaking in disbelief. "Oh, I'm sure you've got something on there. But forged confirmations aren't uncommon, and it's not difficult to dress up and pretend to belong somewhere you don't." A sharp intake of breath came from a nearby guest. A few heads turned, their eyes wide with shock at her audacity, but no one intervened. No one defended the family who stood tall and composed, refusing to be rattled by her words. The woman's voice grew colder, sharper. "Are you implying we don't belong here because of the color of our skin?" Samantha's smile widened, smugness dripping from her every word. "I don't need to imply anything. I'm saying it outright. You don't belong here. Now leave before I have you escorted out." "Is there a problem here?" The voice was calm but commanding, slicing through the tension. The hotel manager, Mr. Thompson, approached with swift, purposeful strides. He was an older man, his silver hair meticulously groomed, his tailored suit a testament to his authority. His eyes were sharp, his expression one of concern as he glanced between Samantha and the family. Samantha's demeanor changed instantly, her shoulders relaxing, her face softening into an innocent smile. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, I was just handling a situation. These people were loitering, and I was about to call security." Mr. Thompson's eyes flicked to the family, his gaze locking onto the man's face. His body stiffened, his eyes widening as recognition flooded his features. He took a step back, his posture shifting to one of deep respect. "Mr. Whitmore, I didn't realize you'd arrived. Welcome to your hotel." A wave of stunned silence washed over the lobby. Samantha's jaw dropped, her face paling as she processed his words. Her head snapped back to the man in front of her, taking in the regal posture, the quiet power in his eyes, the dignified way he held his wife and children close. The man she had just insulted. Elijah Whitmore, the owner of the hotel chain. Her body went cold, her knees feeling weak. Your hotel?" she stammered, the words barely escaping her lips. "Yes," Mr. Thompson confirmed, his voice steady, his eyes never leaving Elijah's face. "This is Mr. Elijah Whitmore, the owner of the Whitmore Grand Hotel chain worldwide." Pride colored his words, his chest puffing slightly as he continued. "A visionary businessman and one of the most influential figures in the industry. It's an honor to have you here, sir." Elijah's gaze finally shifted to Samantha, his eyes piercing, his face unreadable. His silence was deafening, his expression cold and distant. He did not need to speak for her to feel the weight of her mistake. The room stood still, all eyes on her, judgment and shock reflecting in every face. Samantha felt her world collapsing, the opulence of the hotel she guarded now mocking her ignorance. Her prejudices had blinded her, leading her to insult the very man who owned everything around her. Her nightmare had only just begun. Samantha stood frozen, her face pale as the weight of her mistake sank in. Elijah Whitmore, the man she had belittled, owned the luxurious hotel she so proudly served. Her arrogance shattered, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Desperate to salvage her job, she stammered an apology, but her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. She tried to justify herself, claiming she was only enforcing hotel policy, but the excuse fell flat. Elijah remained silent, his cold, piercing gaze never leaving her, his composure unwavering. The manager, Mr. Thompson, spoke with reverence, recounting Elijah's journey from humble beginnings to becoming one of the wealthiest and most respected figures in the industry. Samantha's humiliation deepened, realizing she had judged a man who embodied perseverance and success. As Elijah turned to walk away, his silence was more damning than any words he could have spoken. The air in the Whitmore Grand Lobby grew heavy, thick with stunned silence. Samantha's heart raced, her confidence evaporating as Mr. Thompson's words echoed in her mind. "This is Mr. Elijah Whitmore, the owner of the Whitmore Grand Hotel chain worldwide." Her knees wobbled, a cold sweat prickling her skin. She glanced around, meeting the wide-eyed gazes of guests and staff alike. Whispers swirled through the crowd, a ripple of disbelief and judgment. "That's Elijah Whitmore?" one guest murmured, eyes wide. "He owns this place?" Samantha's chest tightened, her mouth dry. The man she had insulted, humiliated, and dismissed was not just a guest. He was the owner, the billionaire who commanded respect in every corner of this lavish empire. Elijah stood tall, his broad shoulders squared, his face an unreadable mask. His wife held his arm, her expression poised, chin lifted high. Their children clung to her side, their innocent eyes reflecting confusion. Samantha's gaze dropped, shame burning her cheeks. Every word she'd spoken replayed in her mind, each one a blade cutting deeper. How could she have been so blind, so arrogant? Her prejudice had clouded her judgment, leading her to insult the very man who owned everything she held dear. Elijah's eyes never left her. His piercing stare was colder than ice, sharper than any rebuke. He said nothing, yet his silence spoke volumes. It weighed on her like a mountain, crushing her beneath the weight of her own ignorance. Samantha wanted to speak, to apologize, to beg for mercy, but her voice was gone, swallowed by fear and regret. She was trapped under his gaze, helpless and exposed. The lobby remained silent, every breath held, awaiting his next move. And Elijah just watched, his silence more powerful than any words. Samantha stammers an apology, her words faltering as Elijah's cold gaze pierces through her. She tries to explain, to justify her actions, but he doesn't let her off the hook. His voice is low, yet unmistakably sharp. "You think because you serve people, you can look down on them? I see your prejudice." Her face flushes with shame, but she struggles to defend herself, invoking past experiences that have shaped her worldview, experiences that, she argues, made her who she is. But Elijah isn't moved. "Those experiences don't excuse your ignorance," he snaps, his voice like ice. She falls silent, the weight of his words crashing over her. He pauses before delivering the final blow. "I want you fired." His cold stare is unrelenting as the realization sets in. Her own prejudice, her own actions have sealed her fate. Samantha walks out of the Whitmore Grand Hotel, escorted by security, her face burning with humiliation. The lobby, once a place of status, now feels like a courtroom. Whispers fill the air, but none of them offer comfort. Former colleagues avert their gazes, some with pity, others with quiet judgment. As she steps outside, her heart sinks. The weight of what she's done becomes unbearable. The people she once looked down on are now the ones she longs to reach out to. The world she knew is collapsing, and with it, her sense of self-worth. Her mistake has cost her more than just her job. It's shattered her pride. As she walks away, her future uncertain, she can't help but wonder. How does one come back from something like this? What's left when everything falls apart? Alone in her small apartment, Samantha replays the events in her mind. The confrontation with Elijah, the look of disappointment in his eyes, it's all too much. She thought her words were justified, but now she sees the ugliness behind them. The truth she had ignored for so long is glaring at her. Her biases, deeply rooted from her childhood, had shaped her every action. The media, society's subtle cues, and her upbringing, all had played a part in molding her narrow views. Now, facing the consequences, she wonders how she could have been so blind. Her shame is almost suffocating, and for the first time, she feels the weight of her privilege. Could she change? Was she even capable of understanding the damage she had caused? The truth is, she doesn't know. But one thing is certain, she can no longer live in ignorance. Determined to make amends, Samantha researches Elijah Whitmore's background and is stunned to learn about his journey from poverty to wealth. She decides to apologize sincerely, but the challenge is getting him to listen. Tension builds as she prepares to face him again. Samantha approaches Elijah outside the hotel, heart pounding. She's not sure what to expect, but she's ready to apologize, to show him the sincerity she now feels. "Elijah," she begins, her voice shaky. "I'm so sorry for what I said. It was wrong, and I was wrong." Elijah doesn't flinch. His eyes are unreadable, cold. He listens but offers no reassurance. "What changed?" he asks, his voice steady but harsh. "Why should I believe this isn't just another act?" Samantha's heart sinks. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but the weight of his skepticism is overwhelming. She stumbles over her words, trying to explain her transformation, but Elijah's gaze remains unwavering. "You can't just apologize and expect everything to be fixed," he says. "You have to prove it." With that, he turns and walks away, leaving her standing there, uncertain of what comes next. A few days later, Elijah arranges a meeting with Samantha at a local community center he funds. It's a humble place, far from the luxury of the Whitmore Grand, but it's filled with warmth and purpose. Elijah shares his story of growing up in poverty, of being constantly judged by the color of his skin, and how he fought not only for wealth but for dignity. His words hit Samantha hard, revealing the depth of her own ignorance. Samantha listens, humbled by his wisdom. For the first time, she truly sees the impact of her actions. She understands now. Change isn't just about saying sorry, it's about living differently, seeing the world through another's eyes. Samantha volunteers at the community center, learning from those she once judged. Elijah watches from afar, satisfied that she's genuinely trying to change. The story ends with her finding purpose beyond the hotel, wiser and more compassionate, while Elijah's family leaves the hotel, their dignity intact.